Communications.
I'm a plumber and I'm on site for a job, and we're snaking a drain, and we've been pulling back. We probably pulled back about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of it looks like flesh type of stuff, meat, and we don't know what it is.
When these plumbers were called out to a quiet Ontario neighborhood in December 2017, they expected it to be a routine job. A blocked drain is usually a simple fix. The plumbers brought their drain snake with them, an essential plumbing tool made up of a long wire with a corkscrew end. If the blockage wasn't substantial, it shouldn't have taken them longer than an hour with this specialist tool. But they encountered a problem. After several days of blocked pipes, the neighbors were getting antsy. They wanted a quick and easy fix to the problem. But what the plumbers discovered in the drains was anything but quick and easy. Their gruesome discovery would have police descending upon the area, turning it into a crime scene. The plumbers had discovered evidence of a grisly murder with far-reaching consequences, and body parts callously flushed down the toilet. This is the chilling story of Adam Strong. Let's start with Rory Hashe. She was born in July 1999 in Oshawa, a quiet suburb in Ontario, Canada. She was a bright and spirited kid with a fondness for animals and the elderly. She kept herself busy outside of school as an Army cadet, and by the age of 13 she had received the Cadet of the Year title twice. But when she entered high school a year later, things took a turn for the worse. As a 14-year-old freshman, she was offered crystal meth. She accepted it, the first mistake in what would go on to be a years-long struggle with addiction as only a teenager. Rory came from a troubled background. Her grandfather was Bernie Gwindon, otherwise known as Bernie the Frog, the founder of Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club, which was for a time the second largest biker club in the world. As an outlaw biker with drug and assault convictions, he'd served 22 years in prison and had had anywhere between 11 and 16 children. One of these was Rory's uncle, Harley Davidson Gwindon, who owned a clothing store in Oshawa. Rory and her uncle were close. Harley himself was a Hells Angels biker with a history of drug offenses and a tattoo on his back that announced his fight record in prison: 41 wins and no losses. Still, he had a soft spot for his teenaged niece. In 2016, when she was 17, she lived with Harley and his family when he was under house arrest on drug charges. Rory's mother, Shannon Dion, had reported herself to the Children's Aid Society because she thought it was the only way of getting Rory the help she needed with her addiction. The services didn't help, but Rory was able to turn her life around on her own. The last 6 months of her life were positive ones. Rory had a boyfriend, Tony, and even her own apartment. Harley had recently given her and her mother $1,000 to help with living expenses. But Rory had found a job of her own and had gone back to school. Things were looking up. In August 2017, her aunt, Michelle Gwindon, took her to a drugstore to buy a pregnancy test. It came back positive. Rory was pregnant, and she wanted to keep the baby. She was looking forward to motherhood. But it was at the end of that same month that things would go horribly wrong. On August 10th, there was an unexplained fire in Rory's mother's house. It injured Shannon and killed her dog. This might have been the inciting incident in Rory's downward spiral. Rory was a regular at a youth center called The Refuge. Workers there noted that she had relapsed into drug use recently, though in August they said she was doing better. A few days before the end of August, Harley met with Rory and noticed something different about her. She didn't want to talk about what was going on with her and seemed cornered, secretive. He described her hug as heartbreaking, the largest hug she'd ever given him, a hug that felt like a final goodbye. On August 29, 2017, Rory's friend and the friend's mom took her to the hospital. We don't know exactly the reason why, but she's been described as having had some sort of mental episode. They were captured on CCTV sitting in the waiting room. Rory's friend and the friend's mom were pictured exiting the hospital shortly afterwards, leaving Rory alone to wait. She sat in the waiting room for 15 minutes, but then she left before she could be examined by a doctor. She can be seen in this footage leaving the hospital on her own. This was the last time Rory Hashe would be seen alive. When she didn't show up at the refuge for a few days, her friends and guidance counselor began to get worried. Together with her family, they raised the alarm. Some people thought she had skipped town, reverting to old habits, but her closest family were sure she wouldn't do that now, whatever her recent troubles. She was pregnant and in a stable relationship. They knew something was wrong. And then on September 11th, 2017, her story took a horrifying turn. It was a pleasant evening in Oshawa Harbor, and a grandfather and his 11-year-old grandson were out fishing. Standing on the pier, they noticed something strange in the water. It appeared at first to be a piece of trash, so the pair cast their lines toward it to hook it and make the lake cleaner. After about half an hour of effort, they managed to reel it close enough that they could catch it in a net and haul it onto the pier. One of them recalls thinking it was an animal of some sort, maybe a chicken. But the anglers would soon realize the truth was far worse. The grandfather recalls saying, "I think that's a body." The item drawn in from the lake was, in fact, a female torso. When the police arrived, they determined it showed signs of trauma and that it had been deliberately severed from the rest of the body.
Somebody killed a woman and dumped her remains. We are live over the Oshawa Harbor. Good evening. The busy spot along the waterfront is now a disturbing crime scene.
The discovery made by a fisherman and his grandson. They saw a torso in the water.
Lots of questions tonight, very few answers. Who was this woman? Where did she come from? Who wanted her dead?
Police took the torso away to be identified.
We would probably reach out to other services to see if there are any unsolved missing person investigations.
But Lake Ontario was a huge area, and the police couldn't rule out that it had been carried to Oshawa from somewhere else. The absence of the pelvis from the torso made identification more difficult, and the condition of the torso made it difficult to determine whether the victim had been pregnant or not. It took until November 10th, nearly 2 months, for the police to compare the torso's DNA with DNA supplied by Rory's family and find that it matched. The severed torso belonged to Rory Hashe, and her missing persons case had turned into a murder. But how had her torso ended up in the lake? Who had killed her? And, horrifyingly, where was the rest of her body? There were no leads. The lake had washed away any evidence that could point to the perpetrator, and Rory's final movements were a mystery. They didn't know how long she'd been in the lake or how long she'd been alive after leaving the hospital waiting room. Whom had she met? What had they done to her? For now, the police didn't know, and the family settled down anxiously to wait. They waited until December 28, 2017, when the police were notified of a grim discovery by an Oshawa plumber. The plumbers were called out about a pipe blockage by a couple in an upstairs rental apartment. The blockage had lasted several days, and the other resident of the building, the man who lived in the basement suite, Adam Strong, hadn't been able to do anything about it, though he'd asked the upstairs neighbor for a plumbing snake to clear it. He'd told them it was an inflated condom blocking the drain. The upstairs neighbors took it upon themselves to call the plumbers. The source of the blockage was the downstairs apartment, which Strong had been renting for over a decade. So the plumbers knocked on Strong's door. The basement suite was filled with a nauseating stench. Strong seemed nervous, commenting that the state of the drains was vile. And as we know, as the plumbers snaked the pipes, they found something awful.
I've never seen that. I'm taking the garbage out. Everything is here.
Knives by the bed.
The police arrived shortly afterwards. They suspected that the material coming out of the pipes was human flesh. The plumbers were horrified by what they'd stumbled upon and the awareness that they'd spent so many hours in contact with this man. Because when the police knocked on Strong's door, he opened it and said almost immediately, "The jig's up, it's a body." They arrested him instantly. While in the squad car outside, he continued to be talkative. He said, "If you want the rest of her, she's in my freezer, and she's pretty defleshed." With a mounting feeling of horror, the officers opened the freezer. Inside it, they found various severed body parts. These included a human head. On the neck was tattooed the word "alive," the same tattoo Rory had had. These were Rory Hashe's body parts. Her autopsy revealed multiple facial injuries and 2 fractures. The exact cause of death was not certain. She had drugs in her system, but there was no way of determining the quantity. It was also suggested that she might have been strangled or died from blunt force trauma. Whatever the case, she had died in a horrible attack.
You said to the officers, if you're looking for the rest of her, you'll find her in the freezer. My question to you is the person in that freezer, Rory?
I decline to answer that question. I was told these things go on for like hours. Is that true? Again, it's true.
The police didn't get anywhere interviewing Strong, though he'd previously been talkative, almost bragging about the human remains found on his property. So they turned back to his apartment to search for more evidence. It was extremely messy and cluttered. They found a number of restraining devices and adult toys, alongside weapons like a hammer. On this hammer, they found Rory's DNA. They found Rory's running shoes in a plastic bag with what appeared to be blood spatter on them. They also found blood spatter on the wall and the bottom baseboards leading into Strong's bedroom. There was evidence of other crimes too. Strong's online search history documented his obsession with extreme gore and death. This interest had crossed over into the real world in alarming ways. They found an undetonated pipe bomb, which the bomb squad had to be called to detonate.
Tonight, a loud bang in the heart of an Oshawa neighborhood, the controlled explosion of a suspicious package at the scene of a suspicious death investigation for Durham Regional Police.
Perhaps most damningly, they also found a specialty knife in the knife drawer. It was the sort of knife used by hunters to cut and skin animals. The sort of knife that could have been used for Rory's dismemberment. They checked this knife for Rory's DNA, but what they found on it would blow this case wide open. It was the DNA of another victim. This second victim was 19-year-old Candace Fitzpatrick. Candace was born in 1989. Not much is known about her except for her similarities to Rory. She too was often out on the streets in Oshawa, and she also had a drug problem. But she also had a loving family, the same way Rory did, and that family had been looking for her for nearly 10 years, ever since she went missing in March 2008.
The remaining missing female at the time was identified as Candace Fitzpatrick from the Oshawa area. Family had reported to the DRPS in 2010 concerns of her not having been seen since 2008, and she was 18 years old at the time.
I felt right from the get-go that this was a seasoned person that has done this before, because my daughter was tough. She was very tough, and she would not have been an easy catch for anybody to handle, you know what I mean? So I knew he knew what he was doing.
Now, finally, they had a clue as to what had happened to her, and it was nothing good. They had Candace's DNA on the knife, but they found no sign of her body, so they went back to Strong. Initially, he wanted to talk about Rory. He revealed a callous, cruel attitude to her death and the way he'd dismembered her, which he said he'd begun on Christmas Eve 2017 because that was when the neighbors were away.
So, the 24th is when you start this. You said Christmas Eve? Yes. Are you doing this while it's frozen or partially defrosted? Completely defrosted. Okay.
They had already charged Strong with committing an indignity to a dead body. He believed that as long as they stuck to this line of questioning about the practicalities of what he'd done after Rory was dead, he was safe from any other charges. But the more he told the detectives, the more they could push him to reveal more incriminating details, and the more a judge could infer about what he'd done to Rory while she was alive. Strong did not give an actual confession to either murder, that of Rory or of Candace, but he did admit to knowing Rory, having had dinner with her, and that she'd come to his apartment on more than one occasion. He continued to confess that he dismembered her body after her death, and expressed surprise that her torso had been found in the lake. He didn't think she should have floated. He also described the months it took him to dispose of her body parts as the result of procrastination. He blamed his possession of the knife with Candace's DNA on it as procrastination too, admitting he should have disposed of it and then he might not have been caught. And he admitted to having known Candace in the first place. This and the physical DNA evidence were enough for the police to charge Adam Strong with both murders in November 2018, a year after Rory's torso had been identified. Without a confession, the prosecutors had to focus on Strong as a person. Strong, born in 1972, was 45 when the plumbers found Rory's remains. He was a gas station attendant and occasional film set security guard. Not much is known about his early life, though he claimed to have had a bad childhood, blaming it for his behavior. "They are my actions, but I don't think I would have made those actions had I been nurtured," he said. "It was a really bad childhood." He also had a troubled history with women. Prosecutors called 2 women to the stand who'd both had relationships with Strong in the past, at least 20 years ago, when Strong himself was in his 20s. They said he'd enjoyed bondage and choking, which for one of the women was consensual, but for the other woman was not. She said she'd felt frightened for her safety when it happened. This troubling behavior painted a picture of an aggressive and cruel person. The defense tried to suggest that perhaps the girls had overdosed and Strong had panicked, disposing of their bodies in case he was blamed. Rory's head injuries, however, told a different story. Strong did his best to delay the trial's proceedings. It took place during the pandemic, meaning much of it was conducted via video link, but even so, there were occasions when he refused to appear. "I was up all night," he complained, refusing to meet with his lawyer to discuss the case. He said, "I'm tired, I want to go to bed." His arrogance did not endear him to the court, and on March 16, 2021, after many delays, Strong was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder for killing Rory Hashe and 1 count of manslaughter in Candace Fitzpatrick's death. This was all the more remarkable without Candace's body and without a confession to either killing. But the confession to dismemberment was evidently enough. The count of murder carried an automatic life sentence. Perhaps resigning himself to his fate, in July 2021, Strong admitted to a prison guard the location of Candace's remains. The police took him to the location, which was an intersection in Oshawa, and he pointed out where he thought he'd buried her body. They recovered Candace's remains and were finally able to offer her family closure.
We're barely surviving a year and a half going through this. I couldn't imagine 10 years, you know? And I met that family in person. There's no way that they did not report that child missing. There's no way, you know? They're good. They're good-hearted people. They're hurt. They're crushed. They're crushed. It's very hard to accept that this happened so close to the police station, so close to the downtown core, you know? I've lived in Oshawa 43 years. I was born and raised here. I never thought we had to worry about problems like this here. We had some bad people, but not sent straight from the pit of hell. You know what I mean? So I don't know how to feel about anything other than right now I'm most blessed by the work the detectives have done and their superiors and everything that's been put into this. I do not get the attitude. He's guilty of nothing in his mind. He's already judged, tried, and convicted himself of being guilty of nothing. You know what I mean? I don't have any words for this guy. I don't have any names to call him. I don't have any words for him other than, maybe think about doing the right thing for this city and my family and all my friends that will never be the same again because this has slaughtered us all.
Strong's sentence will be especially dangerous for him. Rory's family connection to biker gangs, including notorious outlaw biker Bernie Gwindon, founder of Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club, means that people on the inside will be gunning for Strong as the man who killed their leader's granddaughter. One convict said, "You can't kill the granddaughter of somebody connected to the Hells Angels. It all gets down to that. You can't kill a biker's granddaughter and get away with it." But we still don't know exactly how Strong met these women or why he murdered them. The prosecution theorized that these were crimes of opportunity, that Strong ran into Candace and Rory on the street and kidnapped them. He still has not revealed the truth. What's most disturbing is the decade-long gap between his first kill and his second, and the question of what he might have done in between. What do you think about this horrible story? How could Strong's crimes go undetected for so long? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, keep up with our channel, and we'll see you very soon on The Decoder.